And I knew within just a matter of days, I was not cut out to work in a large corporation. And I needed to start moving towards having my own thing. It took a few years to do that, but hello, everyone. Welcome to Seek, Go, Create. This is your host, Tim Winders. We have a great conversation today on business and success in business. And just finished reading the book. This is an author that we've got that is a great book that I recommend for business people and leaders. We'll talk more about that as we get started, but welcome. Before we get into introducing the guest, I want to remind you, and this is going to be a great episode for this, we have extensive show notes, episode notes on our website at seekgocreate.com. So much so that if you're listening to this in your car or vehicle going down the road and you hear something and say, I need to go back to that section because I want to take notes or listen to it again, you can go to seekgocreate.com, click on the episode notes, and you can actually go to that topic. We have it outlined out and it'll have a timestamp behind it. And you could click on it and it will take you to the audio of the episode at that time. So you may want to listen to the whole thing again, but you can actually go specifically to that section. I am so excited about what we've got now on our website with all of those show notes. So make sure you check that out, especially for an episode where we're going to be talking some details like this one today. Today we have Shawn Burcham. And he is a CEO, a speaker, an author. Like I said, I just finished reading his book, founder of PFSbrands and Grit Business Coaching, so many other things. He's got an incredible bio, but Shawn, welcome to Seek, Go, Create.
Thank you, Tim. Glad to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah. And we talked right before we hit record. You're coming to us from the middle of Missouri, right?
The cultural center of the universe right here in Fort Summit, Missouri. So right outside of the state capital of Jefferson City.
The cultural center of the universe. You stated that with so much factual emphasis to it. I don't even think we could argue with that, right?
Well, that's true. Probably don't need to argue with that because I don't have a lot of data or facts to back that up. But we like to say that it is kind of the heartland of America right here in the central part of the country.
Yeah, I've actually never heard that. So you kind of surprised me a little bit with that. I'm actually just outside of Rapid City, South Dakota right now. And then last night I went to a rodeo, which it wasn't my first rodeo. It was actually my second rodeo that I've ever been to. I grew up in Atlanta and all of that, but I'll tell you that some people there would probably argue that they are the cultural center of the United States. So there could be a little bit of battle going on there, but we won't.
Everybody's got their own little biases, I'm sure. So.
Yeah, I tell you what, they feel pretty strongly there that they've got a lot, and they do, man. It's a great part of the country, just like a lot of places are. But listen, I'm getting off track. My first question I want to ask you, and this is one that I just like to get the ball rolling with, is I'm pretending, and this is kind of accurate because we've never met. I've done a lot of research and studied you, but if we just meet and someone asks you what you do, what do you typically tell people?
If it's a business setting, I like to tell them what we do in business. But if you ask me what I do, I just love creating opportunities and helping people get better. So just creating that opportunity and then helping them along. What we do as a company is we put branded food programs inside supermarkets and convenience stores. So we're a franchisor. So think of putting a very high quality chicken, Mexican, or pizza program inside a supermarket and convenience store. That's how we built our business over the last 24 years. It sounds simple, but at the end of the day, we like to say that we're definitely a company that revolves around people, not necessarily focused on what we do, but we really focus on people and helping people be more successful.
Yeah, I like that you kind of brought up that it kind of depends on the audience. I think sometimes I'll ask that question. It's almost always my first question. But I do agree. It depends on if you're in a business setting or with, we'll call it civilians. And I'm actually going to ask a little bit of a deeper answer to what you said, that you like to create opportunities, because I kind of get the impression from kind of reading and studying and seeing what all that you do, that you did end up in a food type industry. We'll talk more about that in a little while. but it's almost as if I always do this when I'm kind of preparing to talk to someone. I always kind of imagine what if they had gone a different path. And have you ever put any thought to if you had, that first job you had out of college? We'll talk more about that in a little while, but had you gone down a path of, I don't know, finance or anything like that? What would be an alternative universe for Shawn?
Oh my gosh, you said finance. I might have been fired if I went down the finance path. Uh, I
Or
think at
something?
the end of the day, my story really is that I grew up in a family with a father that dedicated his life to helping abused and neglected kids, but always did stuff on the side to make money. Just extra income for the family. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, so dad and I, as I got older, we were just out doing odd jobs trying to make an extra buck here and there. I got the entrepreneurial bug as a kid, never really focused on that much in college, but I got the opportunity to work for a Fortune 500 company right out of college. And after that, went to work for a very small company, an entrepreneur that did about $3 million a year. I saw both sides of the spectrum, the big corporate life, the small company life. And ultimately, I just figured out I just was not cut out to work for other people. Some people are like that. Obviously, you hear a lot of founders talk about that. Just it wasn't that I was not able to be coached or wasn't coachable. Just man, I wanted to pay my own way. I wanted to make something for myself and be my own boss. And that was just a desire that I got after college for whatever reason. And I think a lot of that had to do with the I met my wife, and the family I ultimately married into was an entrepreneurial family as well. And I just love success stories where most people may get jealous of other people. There's nothing better for me than to see successful people. There's no jealousy involved with that. I think it's pretty cool to see other people excel, especially those that do something from nothing. So
Yeah, one of the things we do here, Shawn, and we lean into it pretty heavily, is that we kind of have this underlying theme of redefining success. And so you brought up that word success. So I want to go down that path just a little bit more and just go ahead and ask, when you bring up the word success and you say you enjoy seeing people that are successful and seeing people succeed, how do you define that word?
well, it's different for everybody. And that's the reality. You have to sit down and talk to people and what is success for them. I mean, in our company, and I'm sure we'll get into this, but we sit down with every single individual in every company that we have every 90 days. And we ask that question, what is success for you? And there is no right or wrong answer to that. It really is dependent upon each individual. When I think of success, I tend to lean more toward entrepreneurs and that type of success, and even success through the corporate ladder. But at the end of the day, you really have to sit down with each individual and find out what it means to them.
Yeah, and so many people I think early on we attach money to success, and it's definitely a part of it. But yet, if it's just money, there's kind of a shallowness is kind of what I found. And so you brought up something earlier. I want to kind of circle back to it. You kind of brought up a bit of how you were raised, and then you met your wife. I think her name was Julie, and her family, and they were entrepreneurial. And I think in your book you talk about your family. Your parents did a few things outside, but it seems as if you kind of had this work ethic. And I just chuckle every time I'm reading and studying up on some of our guests and I find out that they did grass cutting because I don't know why, but there seems to be this common theme. And maybe years ago it would have been newspaper, they delivered newspapers, but there's this thing where people just cut grass and then they lead into something later. And tell me a little bit about Shawn growing up. It sounds as if your parents were hardworking, and probably the part of the world, the cultural center of the universe that you live in there. I just upped it. I was about to say the cultural mecca, but that was a little bit too much.
Oh, I'll use that next time. I'll use Mecca next time.
Yeah, tell me about. I mean, part of it's geography, where people grow up, but part of it's just the household you're in and some of the mindset and things like that. Tell me a little bit about that, because I think it's going to feed into some of the things we talk about later.
Yeah, my mom, well, I mentioned she was a stay-at-home mom, but extremely hardworking. Her parents were hardworking. Work ethic is just it's what our family does. I've actually got a sign right outside my door. Lost my dad a few years ago, unfortunately, but was also fortunate to have him for 49 years as what I consider my best coach and mentor and my hero. And feel very fortunate to grow up in a loving family. And I've got all kinds of stories from other people I know that didn't have that luxury, if you will, and that opportunity, and we're still able to make things of themselves. But I say all that to say the sign outside my door I can remember going to a baseball practice at 8 years old and showing up at the baseball field before everybody else and asking Dad why we're here so early. And a comment he made was, "Hey, you show up earlier than everybody else, you stay later than everybody else, and you work harder and smarter than everybody else, and you'll see success, and things will just happen for you." And another saying he liked to say, and you see this a lot out there today, but the harder I work, the luckier I get. All those types of things were just his way of sharing, work hard, play hard, success comes to you. So that family environment, you talked about mowing lawns at 14. My dad, just a business lesson, we had a riding lawnmower that we used for our house, and I had to pay him a lease for the equipment to go out and hustle and get some other businesses and mow lawns. And had a partner, a good friend of mine, that we both just went out. We had business cards. We knocked on doors, and we made some good money mowing lawns, but also got a good business lesson along the way. So those types of things, taking chances and working harder and working different hours than everybody else. And hey, if you got one job, it's okay if you got a second job, because you might have to hustle a little bit to get ahead and spend some money to make some money.
Yeah. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, and then we're going to fill in some gaps along the way. But so there was work ethic there, but then there was something that kind of floored me a little bit when I was reading your book, Grit, that we'll talk about here in just a moment. And that was that up until the age of 40, you did not consider yourself a reader. And I was a little bit taken back. Talk a little bit more about that. Why do you think that was? And then talk a little bit about the trigger that kind of got you started. And now it seems like you're a pretty voracious reader, that you do that. But so you had work ethic, but you weren't really digging into a reading a books habit, correct?
That's correct. I read a lot of publications and trade magazines, and I was up on business and trade things, but I never was a cover to cover book reader. That really goes all the way back to childhood, Tim. Most people don't realize that I grew up with a hearing problem until I was 8 years old. I only had 50% of my hearing, and it wasn't discovered until I was 8. You may remember having to do a hearing test. They put the headphones on you, went out to a trailer, and the lady goes, "Hey, just raise your right hand when you hear something." I never raised my hand. So they discovered I had a hearing problem. Very simple problem, just needed tubes. At that time, it was not as common as it is today. But that created me to have a speech problem growing up. So I couldn't talk very well. I became very introverted, and I loved athletics. So I spent my time playing outside, whatever I could do, whether it's basketball, baseball, football, basically things that you could do. You didn't have to talk to people very much. In the 8th grade, we had a very strict teacher in our language session. I didn't like to talk in front of people, number one. And she said, "We're going to read some books this year, and we're going to talk about them. So you need to read the book." So I read The Old Man and the Sea and Where the Red Fern Grows. And until I was 40, that was the only 2 books I read. And how I got through high school and college, I just did not like reading, writing. I wasn't good at either one of them. Ultimately, I got very good at writing in particular as I got into business, and I really focused on it. I read books, not books, but I had books that helped me write better letters. All that being said, fast forward to 40 years old, I hired a part-time CFO that, long story short, got me into reading because he handed me books that I really enjoyed. And I think I even say in my book, something about the fact that many people don't read because they just haven't read things that they enjoy. And I got obsessed with business books, and I figured that how much they can help me. And that did lead me on a path of being obsessed with reading from one side to the other, and a big aha moment for me. And quite frankly, one of the biggest regrets I've got going through the business world. I think I could have been a better leader from 28 to 40 if I would have made a conscious decision to to read and study some good books on different leadership tactics.
Yeah, you led into something I was about to ask, and it was just that. What do you think was a negative or something that burdened you because of that reading? And so you believe there's things that when you started getting in the reading habit, and it seems as if you had a real hunger when you started that. Would that be correct?
I really did. I think more than anything, I was in a pretty bad spot right there, almost 40 years old. Our business is thriving on the top line. We're just not making any money. And I'm working 70, 80-hour plus weeks and just in a massive grind in the weeds, in the business, working way too much in the business instead of on the business. That's a cliche term in the business world today, I know, but I was really in a pretty tough spot. I was down and out. And that was the reason I called this part-time CFO. We hit it off, still great friends today. He serves on our board. And man, I just, the first couple books I read is just aha moments. And you grow up in an entrepreneurial family. You go down this entrepreneurial path. We started this business in our garage. I had no idea we'd be at this time 24 million, now well over 100 million. No vision of that whatsoever. I thought, man, we'd be a small company and I can create my own path and create a good life for my family, and had no vision of where we were even in 2011. So the aha moment was, man, I didn't sign up for this. I started this business so I didn't have to work 70, 80, 90-hour weeks. While I enjoy it, I was at a point where I was just all stressed out. So the light bulb moment for me was to focus on the business, focus on our people more, educate them, because I was fortunate to grow up in this entrepreneurial type family. I lived in that environment, and I was naive to the fact that nobody really understands it. We live in a financially illiterate country, and I'm really passionate about teaching people about finances, not just in the workplace, but things that can help them at home. So it was really at age 40 that shift for me was when I found my purpose. It was more than just changing the business. It changed me personally, and I recognized that I wasn't that much different than my father in the fact I loved helping people. I just didn't have the patience that he had to take a abused and neglected child where you don't get very many wins. I did mine, and my passion revolves around taking people more from good to great. He was on the lower spectrum. I'm probably on the higher spectrum. That's where I get my most joy, and I love creating those opportunities and seeing those people get better.
Yeah, and one could even, it sounds like your father was in what would be considered more of a ministry setting because of the children and things like that. But I say this all the time, and we really bring this into our podcast conversation, that the business world is as much of a ministry setting as anything else. And when you help someone go from point A to point, C, D, E, F, I think there's a beautiful thing there. And so I'm excited to hear that. Well, what's interesting to me as I heard you talking was that you had such a strong work ethic, and it wasn't as if you weren't reading, but it got you to a certain place. And it's interesting, you have that 40-year-old time frame there, and that you had successful business from the outside looking in. We talked about success earlier, but yet, you looked on the bottom line and it just didn't exist because, where do you think, can you even project where the business would have gone had you not made those adjustments, those changes, called up, that CFO person, and they said, "Hey, what are you reading?"
No, it's really hard to imagine where we would be at. I obviously am 100% confident we would not be where we are today. 100%. There's no way we could have gotten here unless my mind shifted the way it did. I have no idea where we would have been. I'm not one to look back. You probably recognize that from reading my book. So I don't look back that often and think about that, but I am grateful for that particular time and place and what happened to me, and how that changed not just our business, but me as an individual.
Yeah. I love the coolness of now that you went through a season where you didn't read, obviously you became what I consider a voracious reader, and it had such a huge impact. Now you have a book that we'll talk about here in just a moment that brings value to the marketplace. But before we do that, I want to fill people in on kind of the business development that occurred. You mentioned earlier, and I'll let people kind of go check this out in your book, because you do also tell the story of your business journey. And I love business journey stories because you learn a lot from people about where they went from here to here to here. I'm very similar to you. When I came out of school, out of college, my first job was corporate. I'd had a business when I was in college, and I knew within just a matter of days, I was not cut out to work in a large corporation. And I needed to start moving towards having my own thing. It took a few years to do that, but I knew pretty quickly. So, we kind of go through those stages and all that, but I'd love for you to talk about the formation of your company in the late 90s and kind of what you guys did. And let's go ahead and fill people in with the type of company it was then. And then we'll talk a little bit about the type of company it is now. And I want to go ahead and let people know that the people that are my listeners know I'm I'm sitting in the passenger seat of an RV, and right now they are cutting grass, of all things. How ironic this is. There's big lawnmowers that are circling my RV, so it might pick up on my mic. We'll try to see if we could take care of that. But anyway, you might hear a little hum in the background. That's the big lawnmowers. So, but talk a little bit about the formation of your companies.
Yeah, I'll go back to 1998. We actually were incorporated July 13, 1998. I was still working for the small company at that point. I was selling branded chicken programs into supermarkets and convenience stores for another small business owner. I actually started in the coffee cappuccino business with a push button coffee machine that you could take in when ground beans and that type of stuff were just beginning to get popular in restaurants. And it had a counter on it, and it was stuff that I could do part-time after hours. Again, going back to my work ethic, it didn't affect my normal job. And we just did that after hours and on the weekends. And it was decent money, but it wasn't great. That led into just being in a position within that small company where it just wasn't a good cultural fit for me. I was definitely in a space where I was looking to do anything I could on my own, looked at all kinds of different things, and ultimately stumbled into an opportunity with an equipment company that sells fryers and hot cases that we needed to create our own chicken program. And had no intentions of going out and competing with my existing boss. This opportunity did just kind of fall in with this equipment company. And I thought, man, I could do this better. I can build a better mousetrap. And I think I can ultimately treat people differently. I've learned some things in the big corporation as well as in a small corporation. So we took the leap. My wife and I, she had quit her job about 9 months earlier after we had had our first kid, because we had decided she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, much like we were raised in both of our families. And I decided to just quit my job cold turkey. So we went from a double income, no kid family to a one kid, no income family, literally within that year's time frame. So we got that garage story. We got that garage story that started out of a garage, much like many founders. And I started selling chicken breading and boxes and shortening out of my garage. And, we did it all out of there. It was just going out and hustling and finding accounts, delivering, purchasing, selling, running the books, small bootstrap company that's never taken any private equity, and proud to not have to have done that. I mean, we went back to the bank for loans every year, but that was because of accounts receivable, inventory growing. Our sales have grown every year in our 24 years in business, and we're fortunate to have that residual business model. So that's kind of the ground roots there of how we got started. And people ask me today, would you go back and do it all over again? I can't imagine starting it today, but at the same time, I would encourage somebody that has all the fire and ambition and actually support and invest in some different people that do that today. And I just love that entrepreneurial spirit and drive, and that type of mentality and work ethic and drive can get you through a lot of obstacles when you have that can-do attitude. So
Yeah, and it's interesting, Shawn, you brought up something else that I hear all the time. I hear people that cut grass and people that start something out of a garage. In fact, just last week I had an interview with someone. I mean, they're part of their story is started it out of a garage, and so fascinating how we have such common themes along the way. I think one of the things that would be really helpful here is because I know where we're going with the way the company developed is talk a little bit about because y'all at some point went from a licensing model and then you went to more of a franchise and I don't think I fully understood because you brought up in the book the Chester's chicken and then I know that now y'all's brand that you have is the Champs but you were talking about that and I've seen these in grocery stores and things like that but I guess I always kind of assumed, and I study business models. I mean, I'm a guy that loves to study business models. I don't know that I fully understood the way that licensing versus franchising and versus when a company just fully owns a product, how that works. Talk a little about that and just compare the differences between them so that we have a general understanding.
Yeah, I'll try to give you the 40,000 foot view without getting into the weeds because the franchising and licensing can get complicated from a legal
Yep.
perspective. So from a very high level, we had built Champs into a brand that we in 2014. Let me go back to 99 to 14. It was a license program. In other words, you just sign a very simple 2-3 page license agreement. You agree to certain things. You're going to buy these products, and we're going to allow you to use the name. As we got stronger, our vision has always been that we want to bring a quick service restaurant or fast casual type program into supermarket and convenience stores and give them a program that is the same quality that somebody could go out to a QSR or fast casual. As we did that, our brand just kept getting stronger and stronger. And to build strong brands, you ultimately need more franchisor control. So that means control in who you put in the brand, as well as just control about how they operate it. And not that I'm a control freak. In fact, I looked at a lot of franchises and didn't go the franchise route because of the restrictions that are placed upon the franchisees by the franchisor. The reason I say that is I think that makes me a very empathetic franchisor because I'm empathetic to the entrepreneurial drive of all of our franchisees and the fact that they're independent business people, but also understand that to build a strong brand, you need to have systems and processes and controls as you scale this thing across the country or across the world, whatever it might be. So the big reason for shifting from license to franchise is that we did have more control and we wanted to accelerate the brand and grow that brand into a brand that could ultimately stand on its own, which we're just getting ready to roll out this year, some standalone options for Champs Chicken and Blue Taco. So the vision for me and what we found out was we wanted to create multiple paths for our retail operators to have and not be stuck with one particular brand. That enables us as a company to not necessarily just have one thing to offer. And we actually interview, instead of sell, we interview our franchisees or licensees to put them in the right path for their commitment level, their store, whatever that might be. So hopefully that helps. If you got a more detailed question, feel free to poke away on that. Trying to kind of stay high level. That's the difference. With every program we have, Mexican chicken and pizza, we have a franchise offering, we have a license offering, and the difference is the commitment level and the ultimate control and the restrictions that are placed upon the operators.
Yeah, and let's talk about that operator. You brought it up here, so I'll go ahead and go into it. I had this down as a question, and that is you talk about this in your book. You just mentioned it now that you go through an interview process. It's not just if somebody shows up and they've got the money for the franchise or the financial resources, you go through the interview process. Can you give us a little glimpse into what that process looks like and what you're looking for? What is the type person? What is the, do they have to have cut grass at some point in the
Now that might actually limit our customer base if we did that.
I know.
But,
Yeah.
it Yeah, it's a mix of, does the store qualify? Does the person qualify? Does the site qualify? No, every franchisor has this. Our model, that's a business within a business, we do feel that we're a leader in this segment because we're treating it more like a freestanding location. So think about it as interviewing an employee. And we have a very strict interview process for our employees as well. There's a great book out there, you've probably heard of it, but Top Grading, one of the best books. If you want to up your game with hiring practices, read the book Top Grading. There's a lot of great tips in there. But we treat our franchisees similar to the way we treat our employees. Everything that you do in the franchise world, you're actually putting, and I say this very loosely, and I got quotation marks, you're basically putting other employees on that are going to affect your brand. I mean, you're putting operators, they're not employees, but you're putting operators in your system that have the opportunity to influence your brand positively or negatively. So obviously with an employee or a franchisee or even a retail licensee, you want to put people in your system that are ultimately going to be aligned with the goal of growing the brand and growing their business and their profitability.
Yeah, and I think that's a great answer, because I think it gives us, I don't think there's like one thing that's involved there. So it's very interesting when I was just reading your book, you do a great job of going over like the business story, like I talked about. And 2011 seems like a really key time for you personally. I mean, it's when you started reading books, and also there was a growth trajectory and a change in your companies that occurred at that point. Go over just kind of briefly 2011 to, I think, 17 was when y'all went through the ESOP process, or at least you finished it up. What are some learning points that someone listening in that might be in a business that you could share with them, and maybe some things you did right and some things that you didn't do right that you could share? Because we like to learn from things we messed up on too here.
Yeah, I think probably one of the things I'd say I did wrong, and I had a great part-time CFO, but I was always a very growth-oriented individual. The top line was the measurement of success, especially up till 2011. I didn't put enough resources to the infrastructure, in particular accounting and customer service, and just the office type personnel. Top line was just way outpacing our support services, basically. So that was a learning experience. The other aha moment in 2011 is just the financial literacy piece. The aha moment, again, of growing up in an entrepreneurial family where you sit at the dinner table and you talk about business. And the aha moment is, hey, everybody, stupid, not everybody had that experience. You might have to teach them some things about business. And the more I researched that, the more I found out that, man, it's not a minority percentage of the population, it's a majority percentage of the population that have no clue what's going on in business. So the big learning experience is really focusing on sharing everything you can about the company. We happen to be a proponent of open book leadership, which we've trademarked the open book leadership now, because we think there's a difference between management and leadership, which is a little bit of an evolution from my book, even to give you an idea of the continuous learning process. But the open book process of just giving everybody knowledge of what's going on in the company, what are the goals, what is the strategic plan, making them part of that process, having as many people as you can in the company part of the process of creating the plan, because people support what they help create. So you want to get them involved. You want them knowing what's going on in the company. The other big, I think another big learning experience is, as an avid goal setter my entire life, I was immune to the fact that very few people are actually goal setters. Another major statistic, it's of the people, of all the people in the country, about 17% set goals. That's a pretty small number. when you think about it. So in our company, there is no option. You have to set goals, and creating that goal setting mentality. And again, going along with the core purpose of helping people be more successful in work and life. I've got tremendous stories, one after the other, that people say, hey, it didn't just help me in the business world, it actually helped me a lot in my personal life, because I began to focus more on financials and also goal setting, whether it revolved around financials or not. So those are just maybe 3 things along the way. I will say too, especially in our company with our growth model, the private equity phone calls that we got and continue to get are just unbelievable. So just continuing to be pragmatic about growth, and there's nothing wrong with growing extremely fast. If your goal is to grow extremely fast and sell, that's one thing. That wasn't my goal. So the pragmatic growth and just understanding the numbers and keeping control of those numbers and understanding where your cash is at, because cash is king. Just another thing for business owners to really focus on that cash and understand where your cash is at and what your future cash flow needs are through forecasting and projections.
So interesting what you bring up. And you kind of talked about this right at the beginning of that explanation, was that, and I think it's something that most businesses have, and I think it's baked into entrepreneurs, and that is, we've got to grow. We've got to grow. And you even said it, you kind of confessed that it was that top line revenue. It was almost the, I don't know. I got through reading Ecclesiastes in the Old Testament recently, and talking about vanity, and everything just kind of poofs, if you, and really it's kind of a vanity number, because if you're making 1 million, 10 million, 100 million, but yet the profit is 0, and someone's making 500,000 and their profit is 300,000, which company's better?
Right.
I'm not saying, I don't know any other details. I'm just making a for instance. And so I do think that we need to dig down with a little more when we talk about growth. Now, you brought up a concept that I have heard, but I've never really studied a great deal. But you cover it really well in the book, and you actually have said y'all have recently renamed it. You talk about open book management in the book, and I think you said there's been a branding that you've done to open book leadership. Tell people what that is, and they could get the book and get into some more details of it. But because I think a lot of people, that scare a lot of leaders, a lot of managers, a lot of owners of companies, it would scare the heck out of them when all of a sudden they hear that they're going to open up their books and open up everything and just be an open book to everybody that works for them. That goes against the grain. So talk about that.
Yeah, I think the big thing, the perception. We ask this question a lot, both internally when we bring new people on, and then externally through our Grit Business Coaching Company. Gallup has a poll out there. The average citizen in the United States perception of business is that business owners, or businesses in general, doesn't have to be a business owner, businesses take home 36% of everything that comes through the till after taxes. So that is the perception through our financially illiterate country. There are very, very few businesses. In fact, if they're out there, I would love to invest in them, that can take home 36% after taxes. The real reality is that number before taxes is typically in that 5% range before taxes. And then they have no perception of what the tax impact really is. So I say all that to say that if that's the perception out there in the entire workforce, and nobody is showing them the realization of what really happens in business, their perception is their reality. So it doesn't really matter how efficient they are, because their perception is the owner's wheeling out cash every day in the wheelbarrow, taking it home. And they just got all kinds of money and it's easy. So we like to teach of the realities of the business world and how hard business really is, and share the numbers. So open book, the misperception. So one thing with open book is the fear of showing the numbers I always tell people that the reality of what they think is much worse than you showing them the reality of the numbers that you're really producing. They think you're taking home a lot more money than you actually are. So why not share with them the actual number? Number two, give them an opportunity to affect the number with some type of profit distribution. What happens when everybody wins? Why not share some of that? If they can improve efficiency, we should allow that to happen. So those things impact it. And then let me finally say that open book management is not just sharing the numbers, because you can share all the numbers you want and it means nothing to people because you're not really educating them on what the numbers mean and how they can impact and affect the numbers. So open book management, and now what we call open book leadership, just because we focus so much on being a leader versus a manager, open book leadership is actually teaching financial literacy, income statements, balance sheets, cash flow statements, what the numbers mean, assigning those numbers all the way through the company, making sure people own them, and also making them understand how they can affect those numbers, and in particular, the EBITDA or the cash flow of the company. So again, the big difference is, and we shared a lot of information. I wasn't complete, quote, open book. I didn't share everything, but even before 2011, I shared sales and margins and those types of things, but I didn't teach anything about it. So open book leadership is not showing. Open book leadership is teaching, educating, and then getting everybody rowing in the same direction and giving them line of sight to how they can affect those numbers.
Right. And, it's so fascinating to me. The thing that kind of popped in my head as you were talking, Shawn, was one of the things that happens, and I don't know if this is media, I don't know if it's just a natural thing for people, is that our culture really does develop this us versus them mindset. And when there is this secretive, and especially business owners, capitalism, a lot of these things have been getting kind of bashed or a bad name. And I think it's because a lot of people they don't understand. I mean, you and I know this. If most people knew what a business owner went through, they would have a lot of compassion for them. I mean, there's a lot going on here, right? And so one of the things you're saying, I think it kind of breaks down the us versus them, and then which leads to a victim mindset of, well, look, Shawn, man, he's flying his private jets and all that kind of stuff, and here I am, and it leads to so many issues within companies. So, do you see that it solves a lot of those type issues? And then, I guess, in the same breath, are there any other challenges we need to be aware of before we kind of move on to our next topic?
Yeah, I'll hit on that a little bit. And I've been fortunate, I think, to have thick skin my entire life. And maybe that was developed from not being able to hear and talk and being made fun of as a kid. I really do think that developed some grit and some toughness and not really caring what other people thought about me. So that has developed that. So, but I'm on the other side of the spectrum. I have zero compassion for those that are jealous of success. In fact, I feel sorry for them because though they have the opportunity to change themselves, and I truly believe they can change that. So I'm a firm believer, this from reading my book, I believe we need more capitalism. I think we should celebrate capitalism. I think we should encourage entrepreneurship. The reality of it is the world is becoming overcome with private equity, large companies, and that's great. I mean, we're becoming a medium-sized company, so I'm not going to bash large companies, but at the end of the day, we need to encourage this ground roots effort of people starting things, and our country needs to embrace that, and all the people in the country need to embrace that. That's what America is built on, the land of opportunity. We still have the biggest land of opportunity. We need to make sure that as a country, we keep that culture and that ability for anybody to go out there and do anything that they want to do. All they have to do is dream it and go out there and work hard to achieve it. And that's what I like to encourage. So I don't think I really answered your question there. I might have got on my own soapbox as it relates to capitalism, but I just think as a country, as individuals, these opportunities need to continue to be created.
Yeah, and I think that's good because it actually leads into the next thing. I've heard you bring up private equity at least twice. And neither time it was brought up in very much of a positive light. And I get it because I've dealt with some startups, I've dealt with businesses that have gone out and raised funds, had private equity, had ownership, and they had one goal and one goal in mind. It goes back to what we were talking about with growth. Growth was all that mattered. They needed it to grow. And it wasn't always a healthy growth either. It was literally many times a top line growth type process. So you with your organization at some point along the way made the decision to do an ESOP, employee stock ownership plan. And 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 the reason that is so intriguing to me right now is I'm actually a coach. I work with executive leadership teams, and I'm working with a business. It's an engineering company, and one of the first things they talked about was we would like to move towards doing an employee stock ownership plan. They're not quite the size yet, but I am going to get in your book because that's going to be good value for him because I just, like I said, just finished reading it. But I want you to talk about why the ESOP has value versus private equity. And you might could look at some other structures if you want to. And this is not going to be a teaching training on ESOPs, but I would like for it to be a high level mention for those people that have no concept of what it is. So talk a little bit about ESOPs, why you made that choice, and how it's working out for you at your organization.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate that question. I'll clarify that we are an ESOP. There are multiple different types of employee ownership. So there's different ways to create employee ownership. I will just say that we chose the ESOP route. It's a very unique path that we went from 0% employee owned to 100% employee owned. We did what's called a 100% leveraged ESOP transaction. So the way that works, the employees do not have to pay for anything. They never have to pay for anything. The shares are given to the employees over time for their sweat equity, if you will. There are no catches. My wife Julie and I do not own any of the company. It is 100% employee owned. There's no ownership with us at this point. The driving factors with that are multiple things. There are some significant tax advantages to the ESOP. It's basically a qualified retirement plan, very similar to a 401k. We're not a tax exempt organization. The employees that earn the shares, no different than if they invested in the stock market, they will pay tax on that money at some point when they get their shares, whether they leave the company or retire. They earn shares that they get vested in. So there are some tax advantages for a 100% S Corp owned ESOP in the fact that we can grow without paying those taxes because ultimately the employees that earn that money and cash in their shares will pay taxes. Now, the private equity piece that I mentioned probably in a negative light, and I'm not here at all to bash private equity because everybody's got their own opinion of what they want to do. So I personally have had other CEOs, other founders. I know other people that have went down that route that have had some great cultures and their companies ended up going a completely different direction as soon as private equity gets involved. So I had seen and heard and read and studied, obviously through a lot of different things, just the transition to that is everything that you built from a team-oriented, culture-oriented, open book leadership, all that stuff could potentially go away. So I wanted to send a message to our employees that, hey, we're not selling out to private equity. We're not going to pull this rug out from under you, and these jobs all leave potentially. They leave our city potentially, leave our state potentially, depending on what happens there. So that's number one. But then number two, the real carrot is, hey, now you got a stake in the outcome of everything that you do. You are now an owner. And that's another whole educational process, much like open book leadership. This just because they own something doesn't mean they know what it means. We spend a lot of time educating existing and new employee owners what it actually means to be 100% employee owned and what it means for them to have ownership. So with all the open book leadership we've created, with the positive culture, the ESOP for us was kind of the icing on the cake. I've got 3 daughters. I had no idea if our kids were going to get in the business. I still don't. With that being said, even though it's an ESOP, they've still got the opportunity to be involved in the business and to come into this business, be part of a great culture. And if they want to go do their own thing, they can go do their own thing too. So I wanted a good succession plan that we could have, whether it's family or not family, that this company and our brands that we've created ultimately become a legacy that can be carried on for years, even when I'm gone.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was actually going to be my follow-up question, is what does, I'll use the term exit versus succession plan, but what happens when Shawn is no longer around? And we know that, listen, I know you're a young guy. I'm a young guy too, but we're mature. And so at some point, I think we're not a good steward in business owner settings if we don't begin thinking about what happens next. And so it's a great plan to me for someone to move into the plan you've got. And there's a lot of legalities. We're not going to get into that here. That's something for another conversation, that if anyone has interest. But I do like that relative to the private equity model, because I've seen, and Shawn, just my examples are very similar. I've seen some people that I know very well that their character and demeanor changes as soon as, not even the culture of the company. I'm talking about them individually changes when all of a sudden they've got X amount of money that's come from outside, that, and a group of people that are pretty much instructing them on what needs to happen. And that's what I don't like. I don't like seeing, we'll call him Joe, I won't use a name, but I don't like seeing Joe or even Sally, the owner, all of a sudden not being true to who they are, because all of a sudden money's involved. And I think that impacts the thing we were talking about earlier, which is success. I don't think you're successful if you're all of a sudden being, this is a strong word, a little bit biblical, but hypocritical. You're not being true to yourself. So thanks for sharing that. I love how you address that in the book. And with our last few minutes here, what I really want to do is, and I want to dive right into it, what the heck made a guy that didn't read a book until he was 40 years old decide, I'm going to write a book now?
I think number one, I kept having a lot of people say you ought to write a book, and I thought that was encouraging. At the same time, from a humbleness standpoint, and the crowd that I hang around with, I'm just me, and I've always felt like I've just got up every day and I work hard, and this stuff just happens because of working hard. So I really didn't think I had much of a story to tell, to be real honest with you, Tim. And it took some convincing to write the book. I've mentioned I'm a big goal setter though. So some of my goals have become to be a great written communicator, which I was very poor, even coming out of college. So I feel I've become a better written communicator. And I did start to think, man, what a good story to even pass along to my kids, of this aha moment where I didn't care about psychology at age 40. And the flip happened when I started reading books. I've become obsessed with self-awareness. Myself, I like to call myself warped. And I don't know if that's a compliment or not, but I love work. I'm obsessed with creating new jobs. And I just love that. So a little bit warped from that perspective. I'm invested in multiple different businesses and help other businesses. So as far as writing the book, it became a goal. And as an avid goal setter, it's, hey, I'm gonna tell this story where I hated reading, hated writing, and ultimately wrote the book and hit the #1 Amazon best-selling list, and Forbes picked it up and endorsed it. So very humbled that those things have happened. And the book was not about making money. The book was about sharing a story, as hopefully you saw there, and hopefully giving everybody a sense of you can do anything you want if you dream it. A lot of kids, high school kids, college kids, have read the book and even posted reviews on Amazon. So I tried to make it not a business book. It's more about it really doesn't matter what you do. You can succeed in life, and you just got to have a purpose, and you got to set some goals. So ultimately, it was written to help other people, and it helps me serve my purpose. And those are the best compliments that I get, whether it be a written review or in person, which actually just happened a couple of weeks ago randomly. It's just great to have people say, man, your book really made an impact. And that's the best money I can earn right there.
Yeah. Did you learn anything about yourself during the writing process? I just wrote a novel, and it's kind of like, boy, I learned a lot about myself. Did you learn anything about Shawn while you were writing?
Yeah, again, I think one of the biggest things was the relationship with my dad, and
Hmm.
and the similarities. And I was always impressed with my dad and what he did. Obviously respected that. I mean, he a real noble cause to help people who can't help themselves. Um, and I just never thought we were very similar in our not our values, but just the overall business drive and those types of things. And that was probably the biggest thing. Is I learned, man, the apple didn't fall too far from the tree there when that happened. And that was pretty cool. In fact, I think the relationship with my dad changed, especially even after I'm glad he got the opportunity to read the book before he passed, and we had some good conversations around that and life in general. So that that was that was good meaning for me.
Yeah, that was good. It is interesting that writing it's even different than speaking. You get up and talk, but I don't know that it takes the reflection that writing does. It sounds like you've worked on written communication. So you did write it all, and all those words are yours. I'm sure you had a team of people that kind of helped you with editing and all that kind of stuff. But so you did all those big words yourself, right?
I did most of them. I did have a ghostwriter involved that I have a great relationship with. In fact, uh, him and my dad struck up a great relationship because of some of the challenges he had in his childhood. So, uh, but he would even tell you that he goes, I've never had anybody edit as much as you did. And I had a lot of it written before I hired him to get it pushed over the edge. So that was a cool interview process, about 2 hours to 4 hours a week of just going through an interview process and having a ghostwriter help with that. But yeah, definitely my words and a lot of editing went into that. It was in general probably about a 5-year process, and the last year of it was ghostwriter and editing and that type of stuff.
Yeah, that's good. So what do you want somebody to take away from it? Somebody reads the book. What would you love for them to take away from that?
Again, just set goals and accomplish anything. You asked a question early on, what is success? Define what success is for them, and it's going to change over different parts of your life, most likely. But success is not about money for all people. It's not always about money, but what does it mean for you? And that's really the biggest key, I think, from the book is define what that is for you, find your purpose, and work toward that each and every day. And I think if everybody has a purpose, again, probably, I think I was living mine out up until I was 40 unknowingly. I was doing things that was driving toward it, but I really didn't have it defined until I was 40 during that aha moment stage.
Yeah, and that's good. I would definitely agree with that from doing a read of the book over the last few days, that there's the story part that's very inspiring. I love reading business stories, how people get started, how they end up in business. And then the thing that I liked was that you actually had, this was the two pieces that were valuable for me. You had a deeper dive into the open business, the open business management, and then also the ESOP. There were like two things that were a little bit more detailed and technical in nature that were there for someone to go into that might want to. So a lot of value there. So, and there's so many things that you have going on. Y'all's businesses are growing. You've got now coaching that you guys do through the book title with, the grit coaching model and things. And so Anything else before we wrap here? Anything else that you just want to share with, we've got leaders, business owners, some people in ministry, anything else you want to share that, that we might've missed?
I'll just share a little funny, bringing life back from age 14. And this is not in the book, but I'm actually a partner in All-in-One Outdoor Solutions, have ownership in a hardscape landscape company that also mows grass. So I had to get back to my roots just a little bit, but a partner runs that. He's the president of the company, and we've taken that company and scaled it from 8 employees to now 96 over about a 3.5-year period. And it's pretty cool. And it's just another one of those things that somebody said, somebody said one time, is like, I can't create a culture over here. My guys are digging ditches. So somebody just said, I can't do it. And I'm just like, I'm going to figure out that, hey, it doesn't matter what business you're in. Going back to what we talked about very early on, it becomes all about what type of culture do you want to build. And that becomes a cliche word today too. But if you treat your people correctly, if you show them what they're working for, that culture can be created. And it doesn't matter if you're digging ditches or you're working in a restaurant or you're sitting behind a computer screen. The same principles apply. If you're ultimately focused on other people's success, you can make it work. But I think it's pretty cool, again, to come full circle in my roots and be involved in a mowing company. So
Yeah, and I'm excited that I could be sitting in my RV, probably with lawnmower sound in the background while we're having that conversation. I even got up during the middle of this and closed the door of the RV, trying to anyway. So a lot of fun there. Hey, Shawn, what a great conversation. Where can people connect with you? Where do you want them to send? Where do we need to send people to get the book or to connect with you in the ways you want them to meet up with you?
yeah, I think if you go on to Google or on Amazon, type in Keeping Score with Grit. Grit does have 2 T's, G-R-I-T-T. We didn't get into that, but you'll learn that if you read the book. But Keeping Score with Grit, or you can go to my website at www.shawnburcham, that's SHAWN, Burcham, BURCHAM.com. Either one of those places, you'll be able to find me.
Yeah, and we'll include all of that in the notes. And like I said earlier, make sure you check out the notes because we outline everything that we've discussed here. Shawn, we are Seek, Go, Create. Those 3 words make up the title of our podcast and our YouTube channel. I'm going to give you one of those words. Pick one that resonates the most with you right now, more than the other 2, and why. And that's my final question.
Man, tough question. Between go and create is a tough one, but because I love to go, I'm all gas. Usually, most people know I don't use the brake much, but I'm gonna say create. It's what I love to do. I love to create companies, love to create jobs, love to create opportunities. It's really it's my passion. So I got to go with create. By the
Excellent.
way, congrats on all your success too, Tim, and really appreciate this. Appreciate the research as much as anything. I do a lot of these podcasts, and you're obviously very good at what you do. So appreciate the well thought out interview.
Sure. And I appreciate it, Shawn. And thank you so much. What a great conversation. We probably missed 10 times what we could have talked about, but here's what I recommend is you need to go get the book, Keeping Score with Grit. Like he said, it's spelled with 2 T's, and there's a reason for that. It's an acronym. So you need to get the book and go check that out. We weren't able to get into that. Go check out the book with Shawn. And what I also recommend you do for this episode, there are business owners or people considering business or leaders that need to hear this message. There's some things that Shawn discussed that they need to hear. The best way that podcasts grow, the best way that people learn things is for someone to specifically recommend it. So take a screenshot if you're listening on a podcast, if you're on YouTube or one of our socials, just share it with that person and just say, hey, listen, you need to listen to this interview because this is someone that is going through some things you need to know about, or they've experienced things that you need to understand. So share this with people. I appreciate that. That's the number one way that people expand and grow podcast. And what a great conversation. I want to remind you, we've got new episodes that drop every Monday. We're on YouTube, all the podcast channels. And until next time, continue being all that you were created to be.